Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries. I'm your host, John, and today I'm going to talk about why having a wee little break during your sessions can be very valuable, and not just for the reasons you might think. But first of all, cue the music. Okay, so I suppose the most obvious reason for having a sort of mid-session break, particularly if you're running a longer session, is just for comfort. And in fact, I've often heard it referred to as a comfort break, but there are other reasons for having them. For example, if you're the GM and you're getting to a part of the session, like maybe you're running a sort of open sandbox game, which is my game of preference, you know, a hex crawl or something like that, and there's always the sort of potential for a player character group to go left when you're expecting them to go right, so to speak. You might have loads of dungeons and various areas of import set up, and you've got it all drafted out and it's all planned to whatever degree you deem necessary, and then the player characters quite unexpectedly say, oh, actually I wonder what's south of where we are now, yeah, let's go and have a look down there, and they head into an area that you'd not planned for. Now the temptation can be, as a GM, to move some of the stuff you've already got prepped to that area, and that's where we get like the quantum ogre sort of idea from. You know, that sort of hypothetical, in inverted commas, situation where the GM has planned out a dungeon and they're like, oh, you come to two forks in the road, one goes to the left and one goes to the right, and they know that the one going to the right has an ogre encounter down it, and the player characters go, oh, we're going to go down the left path, and the GM, not wanting them to miss out on the ogre encounter, just moves the ogre encounter to the left fork. The only problem with this is it essentially robs the player sort of choice of any meaning, because wherever they go they were destined to face this ogre encounter in our example, and in that case you may as well have just given them a straight road with no forks in it whatsoever. Then we start getting into sort of railroad territory, and you'll often hear this term bandied about, and very much the idea of that is the train is set on a sort of limited set of tracks, and it cannot deviate from those tracks, and it only stopping off at certain points along the way. And with the quantum ogre and sort of railroad gaming, the idea is that the player characters are set on a sort of already defined plot line, really, or story arc, and that's the arc they're going to pursue regardless of their sort of their wants, their desires, and the decisions they make during the game. Now, that's not the sort of game I enjoy playing or GMing. I really like the sort of game where player character choice has a meaningful impact on what's going to occur during the session, and that's why I run hex crawls and things like that. But as I've just said, one of the potential issues, depending on how comfortable you are with ad-libbing stuff with hex crawls and sandboxes, can be that the player characters can always pull something unexpected out, or do something you weren't expecting. Like, let's say you've planned out this forest that we're going to explore in next session. They're like, oh, actually, we're just going to bypass that by like making a canoe, and we're going to jump in the river, and we're going to sail miles down the river in like half the time it would have taken normally. And they're heading into an area that you as a GM have not really prepped out. So what do you do when it comes to that? Well, one of the options you could always do is you could always wrap the session early and say, oh, sorry guys, I've not really planned for this, we're going to wrap up early for this evening, I'll plan some more stuff for next session, and then we'll pick up where we left off. And that's a perfectly valid choice. The other thing you can do is you can have some sort of generic pre-made stuff ready, like random encounters and stuff like that, that you could drop in. Maybe you've got like a random river encounter table that you've got from a supplement, or you've created yourself, and you can expand on some of those and sort of ad-lib it and make them into full encounters to sort of, I suppose, pad out or fill out the rest of the session. And then again, when you get to the end of the session, you can then plan some more detailed stuff if you want for the next session where they're exploring this river and this area that you've not really had a chance to plan for. However, this is where the rest or comfort break can be a real boon to the GM. Now, I'm a great proponent of, if the player characters go somewhere I've not prepared for, of just saying to the players, I'll level with you, I've not prepared for this area yet, give me a few minutes. And my players are really great about stuff like that. And it doesn't happen too often because I've been gaming with my players for quite a while now, and you sort of get to know your group and where they're likely to go and stuff like that. But there's always the potential for it. Like I say, my players are really great. If I say that, they're normally far more happier to wait a few minutes, knowing that they'll get a better game and a result out of it in a more enjoyable session, than me just trying to sort of improv something entirely off the cuff and then maybe not finding it quite as enjoyable. And this is where the sort of rest break can come in. So if I got to this situation that we're talking about where the player characters have done something unexpected, I'd say to them, look guys, I've not prepared for this little bit. How about we have a rest break for 10 to 15 minutes? You know, everyone go and refresh their drinks, use the conveniences, whatever. And I will spend a little bit of time prepping something for the next leg of your journey so that we can continue the session. And I've generally found that most players are absolutely fine with this because, as I've said, they know they're going to get a better game as a result of it. Now, this does mean that you as the GM don't really get the rest break as such that the players are taking. But if you have like a 15-minute rest break, you can quickly nip and grab a drink, nip to the toilet or whatever, come back, and then you've still got 10 minutes to prep something. And bear in mind, you don't have to prep the entire new area that the player characters are going into. All you really need are a few encounters, a few hooks, something interesting that they can do in that area until the end of the session. And then, as we said with our examples earlier, once you get to the end of the session, you've then got until your next one to plan out stuff in further detail. And also, if you use this method, you've got these little encounters that you use to sort of, you prepped in your rest break as a basis that you can build upon for planning out and preparing your next session in order to maintain consistency across your campaign world. Another benefit of this sort of style as well is it's generally good to have a bit of a rest break anyway, just like say purely for comfort. It also gives the player characters and the players a little bit of time to think, sort of like digest what's happened in the session so far, and also to plan out their next step. Because when you're licking along at a fairly reasonable pace in a session, it can sometimes be a little bit challenging as a player to sort of take a step back, take a breath, and take stock of what's been happening so far in order to like fully digest the information you've got. And this is particularly sometimes an issue in like mystery games and more investigative scenarios that rely on clues and making connections between information you've discovered. If the pace of a game is licking along too quickly, you can miss out on these clues, these connections, you know, these things that if you had time to take a little bit of a breather and look back at what you've done might seem quite obvious, but in the heat of the moment they can just slide under your radar. So in addition to you as the GM getting a bit of extra time to prep for stuff that you perhaps not envisioned taking place during this session, it also gives the players a chance to have a bit of a breather, to sort of ruminate about what's gone before and to plan out their next move. One thing I would also recommend is when you get to the end of your 15 minutes, you've prepped your couple of encounters or whatever that you're going to fill up the rest of the session with. When the players get back, don't immediately jump back into the action. Just check on your players, check how they're doing, that everything's going fine. It'll probably take, certainly if you're running like an online game like I tend to mainly, people will probably sort of drift back at fairly sort of different rates. So what I do is as soon as I've done my planning, I turn my video feed back on so the players can see I'm available. And as they sort of drift back in, I'll say to them fairly sort of generic things like, oh, what does your character make of what's happened so far? Oh, what do you think's going on with this enemy that you fought? Oh, those are orc tribes or whatever that you're attacking. What do you think of them? And just start the ball rolling by asking a few simple questions. And when the players are responding to them, not only does it give you something to talk about while you're waiting for the rest of the players to get back, it also gives you an idea of Have the players been picking up on the same things that you sort of envisioned they would? Have they maybe drawn some conclusions that you didn't intend, but that you might actually plan on following up on it in the future? And it just allows you to take stock of how the session has been going so far, and also get some input from your players about which bits of the session they've been enjoying. Because if you throw these sort of like open questions to them, you can tell a lot by their response and what they focus on as to what they've really been enjoying. So if all the players are like going on about the orc attack and the combat between the orc and the shaman that got away, you can tell they're probably interested in that plot element. And regardless of whether you've planned to do this before, it might be worth following up on that or expanding on it in a future session or encounter. Whereas if they barely mention it, you might draw the conclusion from that the player characters consider they either weren't that fussed about that, or they consider the matter to be closed. Now obviously you can still always like bring stuff like that back and call back to it in future sessions, but it gives you an idea of which bits of your game are really sort of landing for your players and are really sort of working for them, and you can then sort of tweak your sessions appropriately if you want. Because to be honest, my view is that if you know what the players are enjoying and you know what you enjoy as a GM, then it's probably in everyone's best interest to try and put more of that stuff in the game, because let's face it, we're all there to enjoy ourselves and have fun, otherwise we probably wouldn't be playing the game. So there we are, those are my thoughts on why it's important to have a rest stop if you can. And I'm not saying I do this every session, because sometimes you're in the middle of high-paced action scenes and drama and excitement, and you just flow straight through and you want to keep that trainer rolling during the session. But if you do find you reach a natural lull, or there's a point when you as a GM need to step back and just take a few minutes to plan stuff, having a rest break can be a really great thing. And it also allows you to get some very sort of general feedback from your players and allow you to make a few little tweaks to your session as it's going along, all without majorly disrupting the flow of the ongoing session. So if you don't regularly have a comfort break in your session, and you occasionally find yourself a little bit stuck for your players doing stuff unexpected, maybe think about sliding in just like a 5, 10, 15, whatever works for you, little break in the middle of your session. Obviously not at a crucial moment, but at a sort of natural like lull in a session, and you will find that it works wonders for giving you a little bit of breathing space, and also doing a little straw poll amongst your players about what bits they've been enjoying. So if you have any comments on this episode, or maybe you just want to chat about tabletop RPGs in general, you can get in touch with us a number of different ways. You can send us a voicemail message on SpeakPipe or Anchor, link in the description down below, or you can send us an email to rddrpgpodcast@gmail.com. Until we see you again, take care, stay safe, and whatever you're playing, have fun.